Today, we're unpacking a pretty fierce debate that's been stirring up the world of Dungeons& and Dragons. And it all centers on some huge changes to one of the game's most iconic monsters. So, with the brand new 2025 Monster Manual on the horizon, one question has just exploded online. Has D&D actually gotten rid of orcs? I mean, are they just gone from the official books? Well, the answer, funnily enough, is both no and yes. It's a bit of a paradox, and to really understand what's going on, we need to dig into a really fundamental shift in how the game itself is being designed. Okay, so to get this, we gotta rewind a little bit and look at how things used to be. For decades, if you picked up a monster manual, it gave you these really specific, concrete templates for all the creatures in the game. You see, in D&D, everything a dungeon master needs to run a monster is packed into what's called a stat block. Think of it as a monster's cheat sheet. It's the mechanical heart and soul of the creature. So let's look at the last big rulebook from 2014. If you were a DM and you wanted to throw some orcs at your players, you opened up the book and you had exactly 3 and only 3 pre-built stat blocks to choose from. And your options were, well, pretty limited. You had your basic orc, a tougher orc war chief, and a magic user called the Orc Eye of Grumush. And all of these really reinforce this very specific role for orcs. Big, tough, combat-focused, and almost always evil. So that begs the question, right? Why? Why were they always painted as the bad guys? To get that, we have to go way, way back and dive into the deep lore that cemented this stereotype for 50 years. And to find that answer, you have to meet their creator, their divine father figure, the terrifying one-eyed god, Grumsh. So who is Grumush? Well, he's basically the god of pure, chaotic rage. His entire philosophy is about strength, conquest, and taking what you want by force. He lives for the fight. You see, the myth goes that after the other gods carved up the world and took the best farts for their own people, they left nothing for the orcs. And Grumsh felt cheated. So he swore an oath of eternal war, vowing his people would one day conquer everything. All that divine fury eventually boiled over into this legendary, cataclysmic battle against his ultimate rival, Corellon, the god of the elves. We're talking a clash of titans here, a duel between brute force and perfect grace that literally shook the foundations of the cosmos. Now, this is where the story gets really fascinating, because it completely changes depending on who's telling it. The elves claim their god Corellon won heroically. But if you ask an orc, they'll tell you Corellon was a coward who cheated to escape, and that suggesting Grumsh lost his eye is total blasphemy. And here is the absolute key to it all. The story says that the black blood that spilled from Grumish's wound hit the earth, and from that violent, hateful act, the very first orcs were born. I mean, they were literally created from divine rage, and that story is the foundation for their role in the game for the last 50 years. Okay, so let's fast forward to today. With all that historical baggage, how does the new 2025 rulebook handle orcs? Well, they've completely flipped the script. Instead of those 3 hyper-specific orc stat blocks, the new book gives dungeon masters over 45 generic ones. And that word generic is key. These aren't tied to orcs or humans or elves, they're just templates. The whole goal here is versatility. Now, a DM can just grab the assassin stat block and say, yep, that's an orc, or an orc gladiator, or, and this is where it gets really fun, an orc librarian. You can create orc characters that completely shatter that old mold. But, as you can probably imagine, this massive change has sparked a huge debate. It has basically split the D&D community right down the middle about whether this new way is actually better. So on one side, you have people cheering for the creative freedom, but on the other side, you have a lot of players asking, wait a minute, what makes an orc anymore? If an orc gladiator uses the exact same game mechanics as a human gladiator, does being an orc even matter? Now, a potential solution that's getting a lot of traction is this idea of species overlays. It's kind of like a middle ground. You'd take that generic stat block, but then you could add a little packet of orc-specific traits, like their dark vision. It's a way to get both the versatility and the unique flavor. So what's the big takeaway here? I mean, why does a change to a fictional monster in a fantasy game even matter this much? Because this isn't really just about orcs. It's about the nature of a game that has been growing and evolving for half a century.
D&D has always been changing, adapting to the times and to the people who play it.
And this quote here really nails the philosophy behind the change. The argument is that the rulebook should be a foundation of tools, not a prison that dictates exactly how your fantasy world has to be. And ultimately, this whole controversy leaves us with a really fascinating question about what a rulebook is even for. Should it give you a detailed, flavored world right out of the box? Or should it be a flexible, neutral toolkit so you can build your own? The answer, it seems, is still being debated at gaming tables everywhere.